Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Let's Chat episode 9. Hard to believe we're already on episode 9. It means that we've been just close to 9 weeks of lockdown because I started this webinar series as we got into lockdown. I have the absolute privilege today of speaking to a Lionesses of Africa alumni, an award-winning businesswoman, and an author, Kathryn Main. And Kathryn, on that note, I'd like to hand over to you to just tell our participants a little bit more about yourself and about Money Savvy Kids.
Thanks, Jayshree. Really glad to be here, and I hope people can take some great nuggets of info away from today's session. So I am 41 years old. I'm a single mom. I have 3 sons. And I spent about 12 years blacklisted and had a very, very financially rocky life. So from 16 to 30, because I left home very young at 16, with no money management skills, I lived on the breadline, living day to day, and managed to get myself into quite a lot of debt. In 2014, after 4 years of financially educating myself, coming out the other side, I started to look back and I asked myself that question of, where did I go wrong? What happened? At what point did I manage to get myself into 300,000 Rand debt? My husband had to sequestrate, my kids were kicked out of school. I was pregnant with my 3rd child and we had no medical aid and 17 Rand in the bank. And it was apparent that it was clearly a lack of education. When I opened up my first bank account, we got checkbooks. I was signing checks I knew I couldn't cash, because I had no clue what a credit score was. I didn't even know that I was giving myself a bad credit rating. But then roll on 18, 19, 20, first cars, getting married, first houses. I couldn't get funding for any of it. And I had no clue why, because I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. So I've spent the last 10 years really financially educating myself, and the last 6 of that actually trying to educate other people as well. So I've always been an entrepreneur. I started my first business at 22. And when I started to look around to see where the financial education was missing, it was missing all through the school curriculum. But the biggest gap was in the primary school market. So I have now developed a whole bunch of brands under the Money Savvy trademark, which I own. So we now have Money Savvy Kids, Money Savvy Teens, Money Savvy Generation, Money Savvy Adults, and Wellness Assets as well.
Oh.
So we've managed to create a brand for every market.
Well, that's wonderful because, I definitely want to chat to you about that a bit later. And Kathryn, I was reading your book, and Kathryn has an amazing book that she's authored about raising money savvy kids. Everyone that has registered will receive an electronic copy as well as the recording to today's session. When you were around 22, Kathryn, you talk about this aha moment that you had. I believe you share an example of receiving a call from a bank. So tell us a little bit about that and what was the result of that?
So that's kind of where the financial spiral started. So I'd started my first business. I was earning a salary. I had a business bank account and I was paying myself 5,000 Rand a month. It wasn't even like I was making a lot of money. I had a baby, so we had real expenses. And my bank called me and they were like, we'd like to offer you a credit card. I was so excited. I got up, I did a happy dance. I was like, they want to give me a credit card. Yay. I had no idea what I was doing. And I went shopping and I blew like 7,000 Rand in 2 days at buying myself a new wardrobe. I still have one of the leather jackets. I was like, I'm never throwing that away. And it spiraled from there. So come month 1, when I had to now pay back the minimum amount, which was like 350 Rand, I didn't even have it because I was only making 5 grand a month. My expenses were massive. And, you pay the first month, then you miss a month, and then it kind of spiraled from there. I took out a loan to pay off my credit card, and 8 years later, I was in over 300,000 Rand debt.
That's crazy. I remember, when we were very young and you got your first job, store cards and credit cards was almost a sign as if you've arrived. So it was the status symbol, being able to pull out all these cards. And you're right, we really lacked that financial education on what the implications were of that spending behavior and irresponsible spending behavior, which we had no idea we were doing, but we did it anyway. And as you said, you would want banks to be a bit more responsible as well with some of their lending practices. But I think it's up to the individual to also make the right choices. There's something else you touch on, and I was sharing with you a little bit earlier, but I didn't get into the detail. But I have these two gorgeous nieces, and they in grade one and grade two. And they're always looking for ways to make money like little entrepreneurs. So during lockdown, they actually created a Starbucks type store environment, and they printed the logos and they stuck it on cups and saucers, and they charged their mom and dad and grandparents to actually have a Starbucks experience. So, for me, something like this is actually financial IQ, but you talk about financial IQ in your book as well. So tell me a little bit more about this financial IQ and how do we get it right with the younger generation?
So financial intelligence is really, so it's one thing to know that you should save, but it's another thing to actually save. So having the knowledge and implementing the knowledge are two very different things. So our society today, specifically our kids, we're an instant gratification world. We are a buy now, pay later society. And, because of that mindset, we don't think about saving for the long term. So your kids are probably in their early 20s. The conversation you should be having with them now is, guys, you should start saving for retirement now. So having the knowledge and actually implementing it into your life, waiting for the end reward. So for me, I pay myself first every single month before I pay anything else. And that's my intelligence, because I know global crises like this can happen at any point. And if you don't have savings, how are you actually going to get through it? So even though it was a bit of a grudge purchase for me to start saving X amount of money every month, I'm really glad I did, because it has just saved me.
So, Kathryn, I mean, a lot of the individuals that have joined us have kids of all ages. I can recognize some of the names, so I know who they are, and the age of their kids. So, what age should we ideally start making kids more aware of money matters and the implications of spending and the implications of saving and why that's important? What age should we be starting with our kids?
So for me, the earlier the better. Our curriculums start at a grade 0 level, which means that the kids are 5. So if you want to create a mindset for somebody, the neural learning pathways are developed between the age of 4 and 12. So if you want to create a saving culture in your child, you need to start between that mindset. If I think about myself in primary school, we were drummed 2 things into our heads. You do not litter and you don't waste water. I've carried those principles with me, and I have taught my children that, like, nobody brushes their teeth with the tap running in this house. And that was because it was conditioned and conditioned and conditioned when those neural pathways were developing. That's why the primary school curriculum is the most popular, and that's when you should start.
Okay. And is there a point of no return? So I have a 22-year-old and a 24-year-old. Is it too late for me to start instilling some of these principles in them or not?
It's never too late to start. I started at 30. And when you're 30 years old, trying to change your mindset and adjust your behavior is a lot more difficult. So the sooner you start, the better. My biggest advice for that age is, if they're earning a salary and they are working, they should start paying themselves first and saving money for retirement and saving for emergencies like now, this global crisis, and start to see how they can start to create other income streams. And that's one of the things that I'm hugely passionate about, specifically with kids, is how are you going to have more than one revenue stream? So if you ever did lose your job, that you're still going to be safe. So I would start with that. Start diversifying your income.
So for those individuals online or will be watching this later on that have really young kids, say from age 5 and upwards, give me some of the practical tools that you teach these kids. Give us a glimpse of what that looks like and what does it feel like.
So when my kids were that young, what I did was I had a money jar, and in the money jar there was 2 Rand coins, 5 Rand coins, and 1 Rand coins, and that was their pocket money every month. If they did not pack their school lunch, or they weren't ready on time for school and we were late and had to sit in traffic, money came out of the jar, 5 Rand out of the jar. So And I have 3 kids. So let me tell you, when one of them didn't get the full 200, it was a drama. So I kind of tied the financial with the responsibility level. And then when money got taken out, there was always a list of jobs where they could make the money back. So washing the car or cleaning up the dog poo in the garden or whatever those things were. So that, and let me tell you, at the end of every month, all 3 of those kids made sure they got their $200 because they were very upset when one of the other brothers had more money than them.
Jen, when we're raising kids, you've got to be so innovative with how you get them to recognize the importance of money. I remember when my kids were very little, and they always wanted these elaborate presents, and for Christmas especially. And we said to them the one year, well, whatever you guys save, we will match. So it would be a matching concept. So you save and we'll match. And in the first year, they saved so much because every single person that gave them money, they just saved it. And at the end of the year, we had to double that. And then we had to rethink the strategy. So kids can also be quite innovative. So for those of you that have joined us, I'm speaking to Kathryn Main from Money Savvy Kids. If you have any questions or you'd like to get into the conversation, please use the chat function or the Q&A, and we'll address those questions with Kathryn. So Kathryn, we spoke about the younger generation. So in your toolkit or in your toolbox for youngsters and teenagers, what are some of the tools and techniques we can help them with from a money perspective?
So firstly, start teaching them how to make their own money. So I have 3 kids. My oldest son's turning 18 soon, and he's been working since he was 16 years old. He makes about 4,000 Rand a month, and he saves 50% of everything he earns. So what I did with him was I said to him, okay, cool. So you need to start working because I'm not paying 1,500 Rand for your shoes anymore, and I'm not buying you a new cell phone every 6 months because this is getting ridiculous. So you need to get a job. And he did, and he loves working, and he loves making his own money. He bought himself a new cell phone, he bought himself a new Xbox, and he's managing to save. So I took him to the bank, we opened up a bank account, I showed him how to use his bank card, we set up the saving pocket, and then I taught him about the benefit of saving, and so that's the thing, is knowledge and experience is the best thing that you can do. So if you have teenagers now, sit down with them and tell them what COVID has done to your finances. Show them your budget. Show them how you're managing to scale back. I have now also just reduced my budget by another 2,500 Rand because, we're in a crisis. And everybody can do that. And show your kids what you're doing.
Okay. So Kathryn, before we get into young adults, because I have a lot of questions with young adults, selfishly, to deal with my kids as well. But I'd like us to touch on entrepreneurs because you're an entrepreneur. I'm passionate about developing entrepreneurs. I see a couple of entrepreneurs are online with us today as well. What's the advice we can give entrepreneurs in terms of being money savvy? I mean, what's the key pieces of advice you wish someone had given you before you started your business?
So cash flow is king, specifically now. So cut your costs, look at your budget and cut back every single way that you can. So you're now not traveling to work, so there's extra money for petrol. You're not buying that cup of coffee on the way to work, so there's that 20 Rand every day. Start to interrogate the money that you're saving and start to, one, either set up a savings account so that you've got money for the next crisis, to start looking at building income generating assets. So the thing that I've done now, because you can only control what you can control, and my business has also come to a grinding halt. What I did is I have created assets, wealth making assets that don't require my full-time attention. So I'm fully automating everything and getting it online. So diversify and pivot your business and see how you can make money. And I'm also a marketing strategist. I'm reaching out to clients and people and saying, hey guys, I'm doing marketing strategy. I'll do it for you for 6 grand. Innovate. Don't be shy and ask people. So one of the things that has also been hugely beneficial for me now in this lockdown period is I've done quite a lot of trade-offs. So I wrote a LinkedIn strategy and a marketing strategy for Chantel, and she's now given me free access to her automation system for a year. So complete trade-off.
And I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with bartering in a time like this,
Absolutely.
because as entrepreneurs and individuals, we all have skills. And if we can trade off that skills, there's a value attached to it. While we're talking about value attached to something, the one thing I have been very, very adamant about with raising my kids, and both of them are entrepreneurs, is there's a value attached to time. And I know it's difficult sometimes when you're a parent because that's your child and you expect them to do certain things. But I've always taught my kids that if you do something and there's value attached to it, you should get paid for it. So, what are your thoughts about instilling that mindset in kids at an early age to be paid for what they do?
Oh yeah, no, it's hugely important. So I have taught my kids that. So a couple of weeks ago, so my son makes his own money. I had dropped my cell phone. I didn't have a lot of cash. He was like, "Mom, I'll lend you 1,000 rand." I was like, "Cool." He's like, "But I'm going to charge you 20% interest, and you have to pay me back in 10 days." Um, and that's it. Like I've trained them so well that they know. I said to them, if you're a bank and you loan somebody money, they're going to charge you interest. If you're going to loan somebody money, charge them interest. You're doing them a favor. It's the cost of money. So just really having those conversations and opening up their eyes about it would probably be the best.
So, what percentage should you be saving? So, if you're a young adult, you mentioned they should be saving. What percentage of their earnings should ideally go into a savings account so that they can secure a future from a retirement perspective or just job security?
Well, as much as you can afford. It's never too little or too late to start, but I would recommend no less than 15% of what you're earning.
Wow. And when you're much younger?
Well, if you don't have a lot of overheads and you're still living with your parents, you should be saving 50% of everything you earn.
Wow. So, you should actually start with a higher percentage the younger you are. Takes a
Yes,
lot of discipline, though, hey,
it
to
really
actually
does.
to actually get that right. So, really young kids, what are some of the games that you have seen work really well to help you save? I'm sure with those that are on the line with 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, what are some of the financial games that you see working really well?
So we do very basic stuff at that age because they're quite young. They're probably not reading and writing yet. So it's poems, it's songs, and it's activities. So we have our own currency called savvies, and we have they can cut out the savvies and they decorate a wallet. And it's really like, what is money? Why do we have money? Why does mom and dad go to work? Like, what kind of job would you want to do? Those kind of conversations. It's quite difficult at 5. But doing something with them. So cutting out the cash, creating the wallets and saying, we put money in our wallets because we need to keep it safe. These are the things that we can do. But it is hard to teach a 5-year-old.
Yes. So I'm a huge fan of the book, and you mentioned it. You mentioned the author in your book as well. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it's about lots of entrepreneurs that we've come across and shop owners and certain communities. At the dinner table, they have money conversations. They talk about challenges that they're facing. They talk about the ups and downs around money. And, for many of us growing up, this was taboo. So, what are your thoughts about having money conversations with your kids over the dinner table or as often as possible?
Oh, I'm a huge advocate of it. I think it's the only way that they learn. So when I make big mistakes, I show them. And like I had to move again a year ago, being a single parent in a single income household, it starts to catch up with you. And I had to save like 12,000 Rand a month because I had to completely scale back. And I sat them down and I was like, guys, this is what's happening. I have to move and this is my budget. And we now need to create a new budget. So can we work as a family and create a budget? Like, what are you prepared to sacrifice? The kids want to drink Hug in the Mug for breakfast. It's 50 Rand for 10 sachets. Like, is that necessary? Can we cut that out so we can bring our shopping bill down to 1,000 Rand? And then what I do with them as well is I say to them, okay, guys, we're going shopping. The budget's 1,000 Rand for the week. We make a list. We allocate a price to every single thing. So if we're buying potatoes, we'll say we've got 30 Rand for potatoes. And then we have a competition who can save the most money. So if there's 10 Rand allocated for an item, I'll make sure I only spend 7. And then we see how much money we landed up saving. And with that saving, then we'll buy something nice. Like, so we've been doing a lot of cooking. We'll buy the cake and the chocolate and the whatever, and then we'll make this delicious, amazing thing with the money that we have left over.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful. So I see we've got a hand up from Tuki Sang. I'll get to you now, Tuki Sang. In the meantime, we have a question from Arisha. She asked, is there a structured program that you offer children? What is the duration and the cost?
So yes, we do. We have a 6-week program. Generally, we run that in the schools, and the cost is 750 Rand for the 6 weeks. But our stuff will be online in about a month, and the online programs are only 399.
Okay, thank you so much. So I hope that answers your question, Risha. If you want, Kathryn, you're welcome to send me more information, and I'll send it to everyone else that registered as well. I see the hand has gone down. Tuki-san, do you still have a question? If you would like, I'll allow you to talk. So I have unmuted you if you would like to ask your question, or we could use the chat function. Okay, are there any other questions from anyone for Kathryn? Please use the chat function. Remember, all of our webinars are available at no cost to anyone that's registered. But if you would like to make a donation to Phoenix, you're welcome to do that. I'm just going to pull up the screen very quickly so you can take a picture if you need to and save it and make a donation at a later stage. So Kathryn, while I have the screen up as well, you know, so it's so apt that we're having this conversation with particularly this group that I am passionate about. It's to help kids to access education by paying for their fees. What are your thoughts around student loans? Because, you know, for me, it is such an impediment to growth because it pulls you down. You've got this student loan hovering over you almost 5 to 10 years into your first job, and sometimes even longer. So what are your thoughts around student loans and spending on that?
This is a subject that I'm very passionate about because I feel that the banks specifically are hugely irresponsible. You know, they go on these big road shows at the beginning of the year trying to sign up as many student loans. And I had many meetings with all of the banks. And one of the banks actually said to me, we know that 50% of these people are never going to pay the loans back. And I said to him, like, how do you sleep at night knowing that you are going to impact 20,000 of our youth negatively because you haven't educated them on the impact of not paying the debt? You know, it's such a windfall for them to get the access to the education, which is a ladder. But if you don't pay back that loan, it becomes a snake. And it's like this catch-22. And all I wanted to do with the banks, with the roadshows, was say, guys, spend 100,000 Rand. Let's do a 5-minute video before they sign on that dotted line that you can say you guys have given them all the information that they need. So firstly, the things that they don't understand. Most of them have never heard of a credit score before. Most of them don't understand the implication of not paying the debt back. And how it's going to impact them for the rest of their lives. So for me, that is information that I want to get out, that we actually have just developed a new product called tertiary education funding. And it really is for matrics to help them figure out what is the best way. So, you know, we've got all of the fundi funds and those kind of guys, but the interest rates are between 26 and 32%. Can you imagine paying off 100,000 Rand loan with a 32% interest rate?
It's
and
crazy.
Understanding the implication of that amount of money.
It's very, very expensive money, right? And that's why, and you, like you rightfully said, that's been my major concern. And that's why I'm a huge fan of Phoenix, which helps kids access crowdfunding to pay for their student debt. So if you guys are interested, please do check it out. And you can even choose a student, you know, that aligns to your background or geographic location. So Kathryn, getting back to our conversation, what has been your biggest lesson around money?
My biggest lesson around money is that things can change at any time, like now. Like I'm going into month 3 of no income and I have high expenses. I'm a single pair income household. So if I didn't have savings, I'd be in a lot of trouble. So don't ever bank on your job being secure. things can change at any point. So plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Great piece of advice and so on point. We run a program where we help develop staff that have been retrenched with two of the big banks. And even though these individuals want to go into the entrepreneurship space, they haven't any savings that can help them with a runway. And you and I were chatting about this before we started the conversation. And my recommendation to entrepreneurs or those that want to be entrepreneurs is to at least have a 9 to 12-month runway, depending on the sector you're in, depending on the complexity of your project, to cover your debts. What are your thoughts on embarking into the space of entrepreneurship, Kathryn? And what runway do you think is an ideal amount of time for someone to have?
Ideally, you're right. I think 12 months is safe. It's really hard to make money, especially now in this economic climate. Because so many businesses have closed and so many jobs have scaled back, people aren't spending a lot of money. So even now, 3 months of no income, the chances that I'm going to be able to start making the income that I need is going to be pretty rare, and slim. And now I need money to pivot my business. I need money to get my content online and do all of those things. So I would say no less than 12 months.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for reaffirming that, Kathryn. I really believe that as well. And there's a difference between having 12 months that match your salary or your cost to company to having 12 months that meet your debt obligations. And those are the things that individuals need to know, that there is a difference, right? So you can't expect as an entrepreneur to calculate right up to your cost to company, but you need to service your debt and your essential services. I remember when I decided to leave my job at a blue bank and become an entrepreneur, I had to look at things that I pay for on a monthly basis. And one of them was my medical aid. Mm-hmm. And I made a decision to actually not reduce my medical aid payment substantially, and keep, a very similar plan to what I had when I was in corporate. And thankfully, because as you know, Kathryn, I was in that year diagnosed with cancer. And had I not kept my plan at that level, I would have not been able to get the oncology benefits, that I needed, or the full oncology benefits that I needed, and would have cost me a fortune paying for some of those services. So I think it's really important to make sound decisions around money, even though they might be tough to make, but you've got to be smart about these decisions. So thank you so much for your time, Kathryn. It was such a pleasure chatting to you. Do you have any closing comments or bits of advice or nuggets of wisdom that you would like to share with anyone listening to this later on or live?
I think most importantly, considering where the world is financially at the moment and the crippling economy in our own country, cut back your expenses, relook at your suppliers. In the last year, I bought my car insurance down from 1,200 Rand to 590 Rand. Insurance companies are losing clients. You're going to get better deals. Any place that you can bring your costs down, bring them down. And go and take a look at your bank statements. People don't interrogate their bank statements very much. And when I needed to cut 12,000 Rand a month, and I did that exercise, I realized that I was spending about 4,000 Rand a month on stuff that I could not even account for, lunches and stopping at garages and whatever. And the minute I cut that spending out, it was a huge mindset shift for me. So button down, cut costs, save money, and plan your spending as much as you can.
Thanks, Kathryn. And how can individuals get in contact with you? What's the best way to reach you?
So you can visit any of our websites or our Facebook pages, Money Savvy Kids or Money Savvy Generation.co.za. Otherwise, they can reach out to me on my email, which is Kathryn, Kathryn, @moneysavvykids.co.za.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. And with that, I'm just going to share the screen one more time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure chatting to you, Kathryn. I will be
Thank you.
sharing Kathryn's book with everyone that registered for the program. And if anyone else is interested in knowing more about what Kathryn does, please feel free to reach out to us as well, and we'll put you in touch with Kathryn. Thank you, everyone, and have a
Thanks, Jay.
wonderful day further. Bye, Kathryn.
Bye, babe.
Bye.